Our 2 p.m. panel is initiatives to divert youth, and we have a great panel assembled. We appreciate Lawrence Daniel doing double service to us as a moderator of 2 panels. I'll turn it over to Lawrence, and he can take it from there.
All right. Thank you, Judge. Thanks to all those that's still with us. I might look like I'm a little unorganized. This is what they call organized chaos. But this panel here, we're going to discuss how we're diverting youth from our system. So we have several people on our panel. So what I think probably the easiest thing to do is we're just going to go down the line and probably introduce ourselves. I'll introduce myself again, and then maybe just talk to you about what we are doing to divert kids from the system. And then I'll come back and end up with what we're trying to do statewide to divert kids from our system. So what I did was, he's not on the program, but it's a great friend of mine. I wish we could have kept him here in Black Hawk County. Mr. Tim McGinnis, he's a JCO out of Iowa City. Great dude, a lot of passion and enthusiasm for working with youth. So each district has certain positions and things like that, so how they run their own. He's an intake officer, so he's actually the one that deals with kids when they get arrested and they have to come into our office to deal with an adult with the system, what's going to happen with them. So he's that guy in their office. In the Black Hawk, in our office, we don't actually have an intake officer. Actually, we don't have an intake officer in the first district. In our system, we actually assign cases. So as a supervisor, when I get a complaint that comes to my desk, I will assign a case if it comes to my desk, and I'll assign it or do it with my discretion, but I'll talk about how I handle it. But for now, I'm gonna pass it to Tim. Let him introduce yourself and let him speak to you about what he does as an intake officer to divert youth from our system. I'm sorry, 10 minutes.
Oh yeah, he gotta tell me that. I'll talk the whole time. Tim McGinnis, D6, like he said, I originally started here, D1. Great programs out here, a lot of good stuff. I like to call Black Hawk, in my opinion, the mecca of movement within minority rights and justice. So going down to Johnson County, I was a field officer the same way I was here. I had cases the same as Lawrence spoke about, a lot of high-risk caseload. I have a background in gang prevention, mentorship, and youth and family involvement. I'm born and raised in Davenport, Iowa. Prior to becoming a juvenile court officer, I did a lot of the things that you folks have spoke about, Boys and Girls Club, mentors, Be His services, stuff of that nature for 10 to 15 years before I even worked in residential facilities for 3 years and supervised one. It was fun. But at the end of the day, I wanted to help promote and facilitate change within our communities. And right now in the position that I'm in, I feel like I've been able to affect the most amount of change for what I like to do. And that's preventative work. As an intake officer, first point of contact, a supervisor gets that charge or that complaint from a police officer. Once it comes to me, I set up an intake appointment. People come in. When I first started, I remember looking at a calendar, you could have 4 or 5 intakes scheduled in an 8-hour day. But I didn't feel like that was efficient because it made it a process. It made it real formal. Nobody got anything out of it. You came in, you said, yeah, I did that. They're like, cool, we're gonna hold you accountable like this. See you later. So essentially you walk out of there and you're like, I don't really know what just happened. I don't know if I'm still in trouble. Am I gonna get in more trouble or what happens next? So I felt like there was an education component missing to the intake process. And I'm an educator at heart. Intake, I now go like maybe 2 or 3 appointments a day. And I go for about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. And what I do in that 1.5 hours to 2 hours is assess more than just what brought them to me, so I can connect them to the needs to stay away from me, connect them to the resources in the community so that I don't see them again. 5 years in intake now, I'm starting to see people who I don't remember, but they remember me. And that's an impact that I think was missing, because I like to tell people, I would love to see you again, but just not in this setting. That's what I say at the end of my meetings. So when kids come up to me 2-3 years later, hey, you remember me? And I'm like, nah, I don't. I feel good about that because that means you haven't come back. And whatever I said to you 2 years ago, you regurgitate that to me. I'm like, okay, that's what I need to hear that keeps me going, is that no one else took the time before they came to me to explain to them how much worse the process and the system will get if you continue to come see me. Because I can only do so much before I move you into the next phase of our system where you have a field officer. As an intake officer, that is what I consider a diversion. That is a diversion. I've diverted you from the system. I've diverted you from further interactions with lawyers, judges, police officers, POs. I've also diverted you from being judged by your school, by your community, by your job, by your peers. Because when you do get in the system and that information is transferred, that's what happens. So the word diversion to me is big and all encompassing, but it's a huge component of helping kids stay out of the system. And education is one of the most valuable components of a diversion, in my opinion. So if you're diverting people and you ain't teaching them nothing, then you're just diverting time for them to come back. So that's what I do in intake, is I try to work to keep kids out of the system. And I value the hour to 2 hours that I spend with these families, providing them the information that they need to navigate in a hectic society that we live in.
Awesome. That was about 10 minutes. So just to shore him up, like I said, I believe he's a great JCO, but what he doesn't talk about when he's saying that he's getting involved and getting information from these families and from the youth, what he's doing is trying to figure out what's happening, what brought you to my office. Because a lot of times what brought them to our office doesn't require for you to be labeled as a delinquent. And that's why he's able to get involved with their lives, understand what's going on, and then make those resources or make those connections into the community. And that we've successfully diverted that youth from our system. So now I'm gonna go to Michael Landers, great guy as well. I work with him too. So we've known him, I've been knowing Landers for a long time, awesome guy. But I'm gonna pass the mic to him and let him give his part.
All right, I'm Mike Landers, and I'm the assistant principal at Central Middle School. It's right down the road here. I've been an administrator in Waterloo this is my 12th year. I was a teacher before that for 6 years, and I grew up in the Waterloo schools and everything like that. And I've come back to the Waterloo schools and made my entire career out of it. One of the big things, what we're doing within schools to change things and how they used to be compared to how they are now, and some of the opportunities that we're providing with kids. When running these jobs now as an administrator or a principal, our jobs have changed so much over the last 12 years that I've even been in it, and where our impact truly is. And that's the word that comes up, impact. What kind of impact are you making with kids? Our schools actually see our kids 8 to 10 hours a day. If we're doing a really good job, we get to see them even longer than that because they're involved in extracurricular activities and opportunities. So that's the next piece, is opportunity. What kind of opportunities are we providing to kids, and what kind of things are we giving them to give them opportunities to be involved in something that diverts them to want to be at school and be a part of the school type community rather than, no offense, but going out and getting in trouble. What are we providing to that? And then believing in themselves. I was going to come up and address when we asked about white males coming up to talk about how we're going to work with young women. And I didn't want to take away from what I was actually going to talk about, but how do you create an environment where every kid believes that they can do anything that they truly want to do? Give them opportunities to see new things, to experience new things, new opportunities and things like that. And that's truly what we're trying to do within a school. And then talking about support within our schools. Things have truly changed, like I said, in the last 10 to 12 years on how we used to do things. When I first got into the administration program, you saw a lot of the quote unquote old school administrators. What they did, it was throw out. Now we're actually doing a lot of preventative things within the buildings to create space, to create relationships, to create things where we can work with kids and provide opportunities for them to truly feel safe in schools and really find out. Education has changed from just opening up a book and you better do it this way to a true atmosphere where kids can grow and really be nurtured with everything they got going on outside. We'll talk about some of those things as we get going on with the panel.
Many of you, starting this morning, the presenters, I should say, stepped all over my speech. So I don't have 10 minutes worth of commentary. Miss Amy, she eloquently said a lot of things I was going to say. The first presenter, what was his name? Josh, talked about a lot of things that we're doing. What it tells me, and first let me introduce myself. I apologize. Because I was going to be here just as an audience member, like I said earlier, and now I'm up here on the panel, so I didn't come prepared with any stats or anything or preparedness. So I'm going to talk off the cuff from just my experience and knowledge, which goes back now next year to be 30 years in the field. But my name is Terrance Campbell. I go by TC, and I'm the chief of juvenile probation, juvenile court services in District 1, which encompasses 11 counties in Northeast Iowa, right? So Grundy all the way over to Dubuque, all the way up towards Decorah to the border, Minnesota, Wisconsin area is my territory. But like I said, some of the things that were spoken about earlier, so I don't want to feel like we're double talking, but we're doing a lot of these things that people have mentioned that they would like to see done in the system. One of it we're going to talk about more is diversion and how we're diverting youth from the system, because it's a common misconception that JCS wants to see youth in trouble, that we want, or we're out of a job. I say no, I'm not worried about my job security. There's always going to be someone to take the place. And at the same time, there's always, I don't believe in the concept of bad children. I believe they make bad choices, right? And so it's those choices that bring them to the system. And then what we're trying to do is help and correct that, or those choices that were made, and that they can start making better choices on their own, right? You're going to succeed in spite of me, regardless of what I do, regardless of the resources, you can succeed. You can fail despite of me, despite of all the resources and money I throw your way, and you can still fail, because in the end, it's going to come down to your choice that you make in life, that you get up and make a choice every day when you put your pants on, one leg at a time. So hopefully we'll touch more on that stuff. And what I would like to have happen is you ask some deep, thought-provoking questions for us that I can answer, because I can't think of everything that I would have presented had I had for advanced knowledge. But I will touch on, a couple things. Like I said, I do want to touch on our mentoring program, because we have a robust mentoring program that's very successful that people don't know about. And we're working towards having a robust diversion program. I wanted to answer too, when the question came up about what do you do with 10-year-old kids that come into the program? We don't work with 10-year-olds typically, unless they're being charged for attempted murder or something like that. They're out of our system. We're going to divert those youth. We don't work with kids that young. It does them no good. All we can do is refer the family and try to work with the family and help them get some resources and address the issue at hand. So if we can touch on some of that stuff, then I'm your man. We'll talk about that stuff. All right. Now I'll pass to Lawrence or Marvin.
Yeah, Marvin, if you're on, you can go ahead and introduce yourself and talk about what you're doing to divert youth.
Thanks, Lawrence. I'm on. I ain't got nowhere else to go. I'm Marvin Spencer. I am currently a supervisor with the Department of Correctional Services. However, and I've been in this capacity for about 15 years. Prior to that, I was a juvenile court officer in Black Hawk County for 20 years and really enjoyed that opportunity to work with youth within our community. I'm going to put out there, that's what I'd like to start back doing next year after September when I retire from this position. But I'm letting everybody know it won't be to start another career. It'll be just to give back and do some things in the community with the juveniles, because let's face it, that is the most important part, in my opinion, of our community. Not because if we don't address them, they can be disruptive and put everybody else at a disadvantage. But the more we give to our youth of today, the better our community is going to be in the future. I'm going to thank P.O. McGinnis for saying something, because when he said that he looks at it as a success when youth come back to him and he doesn't remember them, I'm going to try and incorporate that, because after 36 years of working for the state, when somebody comes to me and I don't remember them, I just figure it's because I'm old and I just forgotten. Hopefully I'll remember you the next time. But so I appreciate you saying that, so I can look at it that way. I wasn't around this morning for the conference, and I hate that, but work and duty called. So I hope I don't repeat myself or repeat some things that you've learned. But one thing that I hope that we touch on is something I involved myself in when I was a juvenile court officer, and that was restorative justice, where you have a joint approach. Specifically, when I was involved with what we call the Second Chance program, we incorporated an employment piece, we incorporated an education piece to go along with the supervision and skill building piece. Let's be real honest. You have to have an employment piece with things these days when you're working with teenagers, because if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense to those youth that we're working with. That's clearly exhibited when we have youth out there involving themselves in crimes for profit. If we can't give them the opportunity to learn the skills necessary to make money in an honest way, they're going to learn how to make money. And we can do that through diversionary type programs as opposed to locking up youth in our juvenile system, which if we do that, we're still going to be giving them rehabilitative opportunities. I feel strongly at trying to do that with youth at a young age so that we can prevent instances where incarceration is the answer. When I was a juvenile court officer, how I looked at diversion was keeping them out of the adult system. These days, we do a lot of diversion with young adults that enter our system by keeping them out of our prison institutions. So there's always different ways of looking at diversion, but bottom line is, what are you going to do to these youth or young adults to keep them from escalating through the system? That's where true diversion is going to take place. Lawrence, I'll turn it back over to you. Talked enough about myself. I can't tell if the audience is raising their hand and wants me to talk more about myself, because you know I'm willing to do that. But let's go ahead and get on with the panel and see what we can do, see what we can get accomplished.
Thanks, Marv. I appreciate that. Thank you. So just to keep the conversation moving, I don't know when we started in the first district, started doing diversion program. We were always doing some type of diversions before. Let me back up a little bit. The state, was it just this year we adopted diversion policy? So it was just this year, July 1st, 2023, where it was a statewide diversion policy introduced to juvenile court services.
Let me interrupt. It started then statewide. We were the first to pilot it. So we started the initiative, we piloted the program before it rolled out statewide as well.
That's true. That's true. We did do that. And it was met with some tension. It took a long time. There was a lot of conversations on different levels in juvenile court, but actually it was passed because we had to do something in response to what the Juvenile Justice Task Force from December 2021 to look at our systems and see what we can do to improve and change. And so what we were doing in the first district was actually diverting those simple misdemeanors when they come to us. Just flat out divert them to online diversion programs. I really don't know what you guys did before I became a supervisor. But since I've been a supervisor and I started diverting them, it's been real interesting, but I wondered how we could actually work off of that and expand it. Because we were diverting them, but somehow, some way, we were still getting some of those youth back into our office. D1 leadership, of course, came together, talked about some certain things and about how this policy could work, but statewide. John McGinnis, he's one of our supervisors. He was on that board. But what came out of that was actually 3 tiers. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Des Moines. Des Moines Police Department has a very extensive diversion program. They call it Second Chance. If you want to get a chance to go online, you can look at a Second Chance, where they have tiers. And so it's something that we're looking to try to create or bring here. Of course, we have different dynamics. We're not as large as Des Moines, but we're not a small rural area. So we have to develop it. And so I'll just speak fast forward to that. We've already had conversations with our mayor. We've had conversations with the police department. We've had conversations with the county attorneys, the public defenders, the school district, just trying to think of all the stakeholders that we know we need to speak with to get them to understand what this diversion policy looks like and what it's going to look like, because we've already implemented it. And so we had those conversations. We let them understand what's going to be happening. So from 2023, We started this in May. Our numbers should look really different because we were already diverting cases, but after the policy came out, it was a strict policy to divert all first-time simple misdemeanors. That's the low-lying fruit. From the research, and I think I have it here, most juvenile court kids have only one referral and never get another charge, approximately 64%. Only a small percentage, 10% of juvenile court kids have more than 4 referrals, and that we consider those to be chronic offenders, okay? So obviously we're doing something right. Some of those simple misdemeanors that we do divert, theft, fifths, possession of alcohol, simple assault, drug. What's going on now, and I know you guys got to understand this, is the vaping, the vape pens. So in order to help us with that, I don't know if maybe Landis can speak to a little bit more, they get those vape detectors in the bathrooms in the schools now. I don't think all schools have them, but that's just one way I know that the school is trying to help mitigate those drugs in our school system. But it's also, we have our online diversion programs. That's one of the talks that we're having with the school district to see how can we get them to incorporate those online diversion programs as opposed to having their SRO come and arrest their child, arrest the kid on school grounds for a fight where we don't know what happened. They have that ability to, or discretion, to actually divert that case where they don't even have to write a police report, don't even have to write a complaint or anything, or create a record for a kid. They can make that referral to an online diversion program. And it's been working. It's been working across the country. And so we wanted to make sure, and we've been doing it actually, but we would like to see if we can bring on the school district and the Waterloo Police Department to do more so things like that. I'm going to take a break here because I can talk about this all day. So I'm going to pass this back to Mike Landers and let him talk a little bit about those diversion programs.
One of the things that I really want to talk about, and you reminded me to talk about that, would be the idea of a school resource officer and how that role has changed as well. Actually, our school resource officer at Central, I had the opportunity, I grew up with him. And what they were originally brought in for 25 years ago is totally different than what they are now. It's different than when we went to school. If you go in at lunchtime, our school resource officer is probably playing basketball with the kids. Our school resource officer is in a lot of our behavior plans or any one of our plans to help students out. Most kids, believe it or not, are like, I want my person to be officer. That's who they want. They want to be with him. They want to have that relationship. His role is to build relationships with kids. His role is to be in their classrooms. If you go into Central, every passing period, he's out there with football, throwing footballs at kids and playing catch with them. He's doing a lot of things that you wouldn't have seen 10 years ago. And it's sad. There's a lot of our students actually that when it comes to outside of school, if they were to get in trouble with law enforcement, they won't talk to anybody but him. There's been times where he's actually had to come into the police station to talk to kids, to work with them, because they won't talk to anybody but him. That school resource officer, that whole role has changed. I think I couldn't tell you exact numbers, but the arrest rate within the schools pre-COVID was quite a bit. We've done a lot to really get rid of that and go a different route with our school resource officers and how they respond to it. A lot of things that they're arresting kids for were things that I can deal with away from the school resource officer. And as administrators, we had to learn as well. No, this is our thing. We've got it. You don't need to handle that. We'll take care of it, and we'll handle the school routes. Those relationships are key for some of our young students. You brought up vaping, which is a very interesting one that it has popped up in the last couple of years, and what's a sad deal. And that's one of those community probably issues that needs to be addressed. And how do we address something like that? We will catch students with these types of things on them, these devices where they would actually be in the bathroom, and there are vape detectors now that they'll go off, and I get an email with a picture and show somebody walking out of the bathroom. But we put a lot of educational things into teaching kids about vaping and the harms of things like that. But that is something that our school district really focuses on, and how to educate students rather than just punish students. It's been one of the worst things in the past going on. Yeah, so let's talk about that.
I'm glad to hear Mike talk about the things that are going on in the school system. Don't be looking around, Lawrence. You know it's me talking. It's real important that the schools continue to divert youth from the juvenile system. When I was a juvenile court officer, I was lucky enough to be part of the initiative statewide regarding disproportionate minority confinement. 2 key areas, what we found is that a high level of youth started their involvement with the juvenile court system through referrals or arrests from schools, things that could have been handled, like Mr. Landers was talking about, through a diversionary type program. The other thing I'm hoping juvenile system continues to be mindful of is when we're talking about diversion, there was a disproportionate amount of youth that were not diverted. African Americans were filtered through the juvenile system instead of being diverted, where their white counterparts were receiving these diversions. And that trend continued not only through the juvenile system, but then when they come here into the adult system. I hate to say that, although I know I've seen it myself, the juvenile system does a great job servicing these young folks, trying to keep them out of the adult system. But let's face it, the more youth that are in the juvenile system, their chances increase of them coming into the adult system. So when you have more African American youth in the juvenile system, you're going to have a higher percentage of those filter into the adult system. I'm hoping that we're still paying attention to the widening of the net. We have these wonderful diversion programs, but are we still just diverting or using these programs for youth that would have been in the juvenile system, as opposed to us seeing some youth out there that are having some behavioral issues and putting them into these diversions too, when they don't need the delinquency diversion programs. They need other types of services. Unfortunately, some of those services are not as prevalent as they would be, and mental health services pops to the forefront. We see more youth these days with mental health issues. However, we see less resources to combat these mental health issues. Then those youth end up being put into delinquency type prevention programs because of their behaviors, when they could and should be met with other types of services to even help divert them from the juvenile delinquency diversion programs. So saying all that to say is I'm glad the school is paying close attention to those diversion programs and keeping them out of the juvenile justice system.
Okay, Marv, I will tell you that the new diversion policy doesn't let anyone in just to be letting them in. Any and all first-time simple misdemeanors, first time involved with our system, they are diverted, or we want to dismiss them. Actually, I think that's what our first line. That's what we do. We want to dismiss. So we are attempting to divert those kids from that first time involvement. And then even at the second level, they come back to us again on a simple misdemeanor. Now we're going to divert them. Now we're putting them in a program because we see they're coming back. So now we know we need to do something with them. And so now we're actually diverting them into an actual program, utilizing those resources that we do have to divert them. So let me go back. I want to make sure you guys understand. We have two ways of getting our referrals. We have a direct file. I don't say direct file and delayed file. The direct file is a kid who gets arrested and placed in detention, or placed in detention, or they give us an on-call. We call them on-call, a request to have a kid placed in detention, depending on what the crime they committed. With a direct file, the person that's on call has discretion to look at the case, and depending on what's happening, they can either detain or release. And so that's what could happen in that capacity. And even if it's a release, when we release that kid, we have that option to say, hey, we tell the parent, hey, we're letting you go home today. Make sure you supervise them and bring them in and on the next day on the business hour. We call it an emergency intake. We can have a kid that way come in our building, and we talk to them, but that doesn't mean they're going to be charged. That doesn't mean they're going to be on probation. It's just another way of us handling the case without having to actually go through the court system. Then we have a delayed file will come to us and say, officer, arrest the kid. They don't call or on call, or we don't get notified the day of. The complaint comes to my desk, let's say a week or so later, and then now we deal with it then, a week or so later. We still have the ability to divert. We still have the ability, the discretion to deal with that case, the supervisor, how we need to. And so with that being said, well, I know my chief, he had talked about the restorative justice program, so I'll give him a chance to expound on it, but I'll tell you how we use it. The restorative justice program is typically the avenue that we use when we have, say, a disorderly conduct or we have a fight or assault in the community, and it might have been some restitution involved, some damage involved, but it doesn't rise to the level of a delinquency of something that needs to go to court. We're diverted or send a referral over to the restorative justice program, and we'll let Jim, the SI guy who handles it for us, Jim Zielinski out of Dubuque, he'll handle it for us. He calls the individuals in and we have a meeting and they discuss the issues that they have at hand. I'll let my TC kind of expound on that restorative justice program.
You said most of it. The only thing that I would add to it is that it's based on the restorative circles, right? It involves the police department that may have made the arrest or detainment. It involves the youth, the family, and the victim. So it gives the victim a voice, right? So this is based off of really just making amends. Like the youth has the opportunity to say, look, I did something, I may have caused property damage, whatever the case may be, I apologize. There's some form of amends directly to the victim, right? And the victim can accept that apology and see that the youth is remorseful, and things go on from there. And so that's a positive interaction, but it gives both sides a voice, which is important, right? Because a lot of times when you come into the system, it's really just about that what we're changing now, but the old way of doing things was crime, punishment, correction. And if you don't correct the behavior, more punishment, right? And so we want what was talked about this morning, ruling with a heavy hammer or whatever like that, right? So that's what that's about. I want to also mention that I didn't mention earlier that I make no qualms about, right? Juvenile court services, there's a negative stigma attached to just the title. Our system is broken. That's a fact. But what we're attempting to change, and we're in Iowa, let's make no qualms about it. We're in Iowa, right? Predominantly white state. We have pockets of minorities, Waterloo, Dubuque, Cedar Rapids, Davenport, Des Moines, which is the bigger urban area. And we know that the arrests in those areas are disproportionate, right? Because that's where the minorities are. And our system is broke. And there's a lot of bias in our system, either explicit or implicit, right? So we're trying to address those biases through a lot of different avenues. So look at it like there's a wall, or what they say, a dike with holes in the wall, right? And all this water is seeping out through all the holes. And we're trying to patch up the hole here with our fingers. And we're running out of fingers to patch up these holes. But that's what we're working on, right? So what I'm particularly proud of in my district, one, our leadership. You see me and Lauren sitting here, right? Two Black males. So that's 50% of the leadership in this district is diverse. And diversity is important to us, right? Our backgrounds, a lot of people don't know about our backgrounds. I speak for myself. I was a difficult youth. I have that lived experience. I went in front of a judge as a teenager. I had some consequences I had to deal with. But I was a statistic. I was a teenage father. I had a child on the way at 17. So my oldest child, who is a young lady, I'm very proud of, very successful in her own right? Changed my life totally. Just because I was in a hospital room and seeing her birth. And at that instant, I knew I had something to live for. Before that, I didn't have anything to live. I didn't care if I live or die, right? I just existed. But at that instant I saw her birth, I had something to live for. And I had something to do. I had to make a life for her, right? So this is what got me on my correct path personally. But my background, who I grew up in the projects in Illinois, so I relate to a lot of the youth that we work with. I got into this system because I recognize the system is broken and there's a lot of people on the outside just complaining about what's wrong. You got to get on the inside to be able to fix it. That's what got me to where I'm at. So we are doing, like I said, we doing a lot of these things that people said should be done. It's under the radar right now. People don't know. But even talking about our mentors, I know I had to get some of our youth some positive role models in their lives. And so we have a mentor program. But not only that it's a mentor program, we pay our mentors. A lot of mentors just volunteer and do it out of kindness of their heart. We pay them. Not because it's a job. They do have that love in their heart to want to do this initially, regardless of pay or not, but their time is valuable, right? And it's an incentive. But they're doing it for the right reasons. And I make sure that because I interview them personally and I train them personally. So we talked about training or hiring people. I make sure I hire the right people, right? Even now in my position where I can hire JCOs, I hire the people with the heart for this job. It matters, right? That's where I wanted to talk about what we're doing in Waterloo, then what we're doing in my district, and then what we're doing statewide. It's a step-by-step progress. So.
Awesome. I'm gonna go back to some other things that I probably haven't talked about. We talked about restorative justice, but we would like for the officers to actually incorporate our online diversion programs in what they do as well. So as opposed to charging the kid for assault or disorderly conduct or interference with official acts because they're running away, we don't have it, but it's something that we are working towards. It's the pre-charge diversion program. And that's just a program, it's a deliberate program with the intent of working with this youth to develop their skills, interpersonal skills, social skills, but it also hopefully help the kid assess whether what they got going on in their lives. And hopefully going through that program, that'll be the stop. They won't come back to us. Marv, I know you had said with 30 years of experience that you have, can you talk about a little bit more about those programs or diversion programs that kind of got us to where we are?
Actually, Lawrence, I was 36 years. So
36, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Folks need to understand, and I know that there's been some new initiatives in the juvenile system regarding diversion here recently, but we've been doing diversion in the juvenile system, and I'm going to speak since 1989 when I first started. The informal adjustments is a form of diversion because we're keeping our youth outside of the actual court system. Once you go and sit in front of a judge, then the youth is facing an adjudication of delinquency. So what we've been doing forever is we'd have the youth come in like they do now, and we'd allow them to enter into a 6-month agreement where you do these things, you stay out of trouble with the law, it goes away, it doesn't even stay on your record. So the main function of the juvenile system for 30 years, 36 years, has been to keep youth out of the court system. Now, I think that it's even being enhanced at this time by keeping them out of the informal adjustment system as well. It is improving. I oftentimes, when I was a juvenile court officer and now as a supervisor with the Department of Corrections, I stay away from referring to the system as being broke, but I will quickly tell everybody there's plenty of room to improve it. Broke, I think, sometimes sends the wrong message to the community. However, the community needs to know that we're not satisfied. We're not going to remain complacent. There are room to fix the system from every level, from the entry, when the arrest is made, to the end, when a youth or a young adult is facing incarceration. Trust me, I have plenty of other things to say, but Al, are there any questions in the room at this time?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to challenge the panel on a little bit. I have this statistics table that our students generated, and it shows that in 2022, there were a total of 668 youth charges in Blackhawk County. Of those, 452 were non-white, either Black or Latino, Latinx. that's 67% of the kids being charged in 2022 were kids of color. That one was so big, I thought, oh my God, my numbers right? Double checking them. And I just, how can we deal with this overwhelming disparity that we see in the system? I don't know if you all have any comments on that, but.
Al, you're right. That statistic is absolutely gross, if you will, especially when you compound it with Black African Americans or youth of color only make up about 18, 19, 20% of the population in Black Hawk County. So that adds to the significance of those disproportionate numbers. And if folks looked at the system as a whole, that disproportionality grows at every checkpoint. And what I mean by checkpoints is point of arrest, that's the initial checkpoint. Referred to juvenile court services, that's the next checkpoint. Adjudicated delinquent, that's the next checkpoint. Placed outside of the home, that's the next checkpoint. Placed in a secure setting, such as a training school in Eldora, that's the next checkpoint, up until being waived to adult court. So those disproportionate numbers increase all through the check system. I will say they're better now than they were 20 years ago. But that's where I say, yeah, the system might not be broke, but man, we got a lot of room for improvement.
I think that they've stayed about the same in Black Hawk County, at least according to these numbers. We've had a substantial decline in Iowa in the number of youth arrests or charges over a 12-year period, and that mirrors what we were seeing on the national level. But in some Iowa metro counties, as the numbers have declined, the disproportionate has actually grown to where, like in Polk County, the percent charged that were non-white in 2010 was 43.4%. The percent charged in non-white in 2022 was 57%. As the number of arrests go down, the disproportionality increases. But anyway, maybe you'd like to comment on that. But
when I hear the question, my first thought goes to habitual offenders or habitual violators, those that continue to get referred, is just having issues with law enforcement. But then the other reason why I would think for the disparity would be just the relationship with the officers in those communities. Or once an officer gets a target on a youth in the community who's probably been disrespectful, rude, just call them names, just totally defiant. I don't want to say they're targeted, but it's a high possibility that if they come in contact with law enforcement, they're probably going to be arrested.
And I also just wanted to speak on it from a standpoint of intake. I agree with everybody. Our system is extremely flawed. I won't say broken. I've researched it a lot, and it was literally designed and built to do mostly what it's doing. So it's very flawed, and we are the people inside of it that are poking the holes. The delinquents, the criminals who end up in jail and challenge the processes, they're the ones poking the holes. We are providing Band-Aids and patches to make sure when they come out in the community, those holes stay filled so they can't go back in for the same BS. But what I want to say real quick in intake is in the last 5 years, I've started a pile of reports. I'm tasked with reading reports from police officers about the delinquent acts that they are saying these youth committed. A major factor in providing a kid an opportunity is seeing yourself or other people in the community in that kid. And a lot of the connections or the police officers, the people who come in contact with the minority youth, do not see themselves in those kids. They don't see their own kids in those kids. So when I'm reading a report from a police officer for same charges on a white kid who they said they had spoke multiple times to, gave them 10 options, I talked to their parents, I took them home, I took them to church with me, I took them here. Same charge for the minority kids is literally, he was non-compliant, didn't blah, 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 blah. Then the charge is usually elevated, even at that. So it's like, relationships, the ability to build rapport in a short amount of time, which only takes being genuine and seeing your human self and that human you're talking to, can change a lot of what we decide to put into the system. I'm not going to negate any factor saying that people are not doing things they shouldn't do. We all do, we all have. But major change for me is the people who stood in front of me, looked at me and said, you're going to change your behavior. Not because I'm telling you to, or because I'm asking you to, but because I'm gonna give you the resources to change your behavior. And the things they put in front of me, mentorship, programs, teachers who believed in me, administrators who believed in me, even when I got in the system, even when my sister was on probation, even out of all the lower economic statuses that I come from and everyone else we deal with come from, the ones that are believed in the most, that have adults and people around them, are gonna make the most difference. And so if we could talk to officers and continue to talk to officers and get them to see themselves as a human being who operates within the same damn community that they are with the kids they're arresting, they might stop arresting them so much. But I'm just saying.
That's very eloquently put. I have a comment here from the president of our local B, Latanya Graves, who probably many of you know. She was just saying how certain youth seem to develop negative relationships with certain officers. And so the officers see them as troublemakers, and therefore they're going to stop them more often. We know all Black people are subject to more stops by the police than white people. You're male, female, or how old you are. But with young people being constantly stopped because the police have labeled them as some kind of troublemaker, and reinforced what Latanya was saying. We haven't, I'm saying too many, I'm taking up too much airtime. You want to come up?
Hi, I'm Jaleisha. I was born and raised in Polk County, and I've lived firsthand the way that young Black people are criminalized. And I think that everyone on this panel are in a position of power. And I think you guys are all talking a lot about striving towards rehabilitation and striving towards more equitable justice. And we talk about how healing should be at the forefront of that work. But understanding that and I talked a little bit about this earlier, but it's very hard for someone to heal when they're triggered. And we know that a lot of young people are being exploited by people in positions of power. So as us now being adults in positions of power over young people, what are some of your tips and tricks to create authentic relationships with young people when they may feel very reserved around you simply because of the position that you're in right now? If that makes sense, I hope that makes sense.
I got one statement. Vulnerability. That's literally like a stick. That's all I have. Oh, I said vulnerability. It really helps break down walls with some of the most resistive kids and youth that you'll meet, even families. The moment I tell someone, look, man, I was on probation, I did this, I was born, I can relate to certain things that they're going through. What'd you say? You got to find their end, meet people where they're at.
For me, that's around kids for 8 hours a day, going in, doing different things, going into their classrooms, sitting down there in their classrooms, being out of my office, talking to kids, seeing them in the lunchroom, playing basketball with them, playing kickball with them at lunchtime, just get involved in everything that they do. Then all of a sudden you build that relationship with kids, just talking to them, being around doing that type of stuff. I'm known to do really goofy things, riding past a classroom on a scooter, a bike. If you leave a bike around, I may be on it. And I will ride past your classrooms and kids will look, what's he doing? And then it gives me something to talk to them about. Just, you don't want to just engage with students when it's something negative. It makes my job a lot easier if I have that relationship with a student to calm them down, or even be willing to say, I'm not going to get into a power struggle right now. You need to go sit in my office. It's your office right now. Go enjoy it. Tell me when you're ready to talk to me. And it's that simple. So many people want to get into a power struggle. But when I'm mad, I don't want anybody talking to me. So why push a kid when a kid is the same as I am? Why push a kid? when you're calmed down, we'll talk. Just always be there and be willing to listen. And then they know that. And so it takes a long time to build that relationship, but once it's done, it makes things a lot easier.
I would just
Oh,
add,
okay, we have just a few minutes left in this session. I really appreciate the work you guys are doing. Marvin, any parting thoughts? Thank you.
Oh, no, thanks for having me. These types of conferences within a community are just extremely important. The folks that you have in front of you, the four gentlemen, are very committed. Can't see who's all in the audience, but anybody that attends a conference like this are very committed. And it's not a juvenile court issue, it's a community issue, and let's all just continue to try and work together.
Thank you, Marvin. I've enjoyed working with Marvin on different projects over the years, and I know he's a very committed community member. Any more questions? Okay. We got one more.
So my question is, I heard a lot of talk, obviously, with what this panel is centered on within policing and like how police officers build relationships. And we've heard folks talk about like how that can be a trigger. So that just leads me to my question of like, how do you, especially within your identities and points of privilege, how do you ensure safety that isn't contingent on policing or police officers? Especially like thinking about young Black femme-facing folks, gender expansive folks, like Black girls in general, like what do y'all do in y'all's day to ensure that safety is not something to be bartered or, I don't know, like a reactionary kind of thing, if I'm making sense?
I would just say that in my role, there's that you have to understand my background. Like prior to coming back to Iowa to join probation again, I ran a program for young females. It was a transitional living center, TLC, which also stands for tender loving care, which was also my daughter's initials, my firstborn's initials. So that was all intentional, right? I think one, you don't judge, right? On paper, they all look bad. In our role, they all look bad. You have to have an open mind and an open heart to see, hear, and understand where they're coming from. My other role is I don't step in as the authority figure. You're coming in to meet me with your parents. I'm empowering the parents, and the parent loves them more than I do. But the youth don't understand that initially. They see me as the authority figure. I give the authority back to the parents and say, no, this is you because you're going to go home with them. They need to respect you and your decision and your authority more than me. So I'm trying to break down the walls in that. I'm not going to judge you. I'm here to help you. I understand what got you in front of me, but let's get to the issue. What's the real issue and how can we help you? So that's my goal. And through that, I think there's some confidence and there's some security involved.
Thank you.
Class is really easy. I look at the kids I come in contact like they're my own kids. I am married. I have 2 stepchildren. I don't call them my stepchildren, but they're my kids. And so when I'm meeting with kids, that's what I'm looking at is if they're my child, how am I going to help you get out of this trouble? Not disregard or consequences, but how I'm going to help you so you don't repeat this again. And that's how I make sure. And my girls, I have 3 daughters. I love them dearly. I'm a protector. I have 3 older sisters. I'm the protector in my family. And that's how I am. And I let my youth know as well when I speak to them. If they got a concern about anything, if they feel like they can't talk or they feel like they're not being heard, they can come and speak to me. I don't have a caseload anymore. I'm a supervisor. Might get myself in trouble a little bit with my chief, but I do actually still speak to youth. I still talk to them on case-by-case circumstances. A lot of times when I'm actually talking to kids with complaints that come in my office, I'll reach out to the parents and to the kid and try to figure out what's going on. So I try to embed myself in their family looking at them as they're my stepchild.
It's funny, that must be the theme of everybody sitting at this table because that's the exact same answer I pretty much have. When running a school, it's the same thing. You got to look at every single student like they're your own kid. There's not a teacher in my building that I would not allow to teach my 2 children. When every decision I make, it's not about the adults, it's about the kids. And every single decision I make is to make whatever opportunity I can for kids.
Okay, thank you very much to our panel. Let's give them a hand for for participating.